stay tuned for one of the most fascinating programs you'll ever hear as we explore the strange and mysterious world of the paranormal and UFOs. Welcome to the ParaNet Continuum, a weekly program dealing with extraordinary claims of the paranormal, on Earth and beyond. Whether or not you believe in the paranormal, the controversies are real, and this program will try to get to the bottom of it. Your host is Michael Corbin, Director of ParaNet Information Services, a global communications network based near Denver, Colorado, dedicated to the investigation of parapsychology, futuristic science, and the UFO enigma. We invite you to keep an open mind as we discuss some of the most fascinating and strange subjects around. Now here's your host, Michael Corbin.
And good evening and welcome to this edition of the ParaNet Continuum, home of common sense. No nonsense paranormal talk radio. In studio with me tonight is Clark Matthews, and if you've been listening the last hour, we've been talking about the lost continent, or the lost, I should say, civilization of Atlantis. Is it really lost, found, or has it always been there?
My opinion is it's always been there. My opinion is it's always been there.
It's always been there.
Yeah.
Now, last hour we talked about the Phoenicians and all of this stuff that was going on with them. And I wanted to say for the second hour, where did they go, and what's happened to them?
Well, the short answer is that they're probably still with us. Certainly, after they lost the Punic Wars, after Rome defeated Carthage catastrophically in 146 BC. There are all sorts of reports of Carthaginian fleets with treasure, Hannibal's treasure, whole shiploads of silver and gold, sailing out of the Pillars of Hercules and never to be seen again. Mm-hmm. Where did they go? Is it buried in Brazil? Could it possibly be in Oklahoma? Could it be in the Rhine River, the Rhine gold, guarded by the Rhine maidens? All of these things are interesting speculations, and there are various legends, and in some cases more reasons to believe that they could be the case.
Mm-hmm. Now, what do we do with the notion that how do we ever get into this thing where Atlantis was a continent, and that this continent sunk, and the more popular notion about Atlantis?
Well, that comes from Plato. That's what Plato wrote in, I believe it was Timaeus, or actually it was Aristotle who wrote Timaeus, but he was quoting a dialogue of Plato's, in which Plato talked about his visit to Egypt and talking to the priests of Egypt, mm-hmm. and what they had in their very ancient records about how Atlantis was an island that sank. Now that would correspond probably to an island that's now called Antikythera. And that's an island that basically was volcanic, and it was the home of an advanced civilization of Crete, basically, mm-hmm. And it blew up and sank. And they're excavating it now, and they're finding bits and pieces of Minoan Crete, in this place. But it's almost like a confabulation of what really happened on this island and the reality of Atlantis, which was much, much, much bigger. Now, why the Egyptian priests would mislead Plato on this point, who knows? But what Atlantis probably was is, I think, what Aristotle said it was, which is the Phoenician Empire.
Now, the Phoenician Empire, we're dealing with, this thing. The cultural diffusion. Now, you mentioned earlier that they were engaged in a lot of pilfering and kidnapping and all kinds of honorable things. Okay.
Well, there was a fine line between piracy and trade in those days. As a matter of fact, there was no line between piracy and trade. And the way the Phoenicians handled it, they were monopolists. They could teach, the Rockefellers and folks like that some lessons about monopoly.
Perhaps they have.
And perhaps indeed they have, or perhaps the methods have remained the same.
Mm-hmm.
What the Phoenicians did was they settled, they were originally from the coast of Lebanon, and they eventually built a great big city called Carthage on the coast of North Africa. And Carthage had a very powerful fleet, and they made treaties with all their neighbors and competitors and said, you're welcome to come here and trade, but if we find your ships west of our city, we will sink them and take the cargo and sell the crews into slavery. And they did. So they eliminated competition in the Western Mediterranean, and they controlled the Pillars of Hercules, or as they call them, the Pillars of Melkart, who is their principal god, Melkart. And the Greek character Hercules is adapted from the Phoenician chief deity, who was Baal Melkart. And there are all sorts of points of similarity. Hercules, anyone who's seen the Disney movie knows that he performed all sorts of heroic feats, wore a lion skin, and was just generally an all-around nice guy. Melkart was rather less likable. He killed lions too, but in horrible ways. And he was hungry and required human sacrifices from time to time.
No, this is Baal Melkart.
Baal Melkart, right, the national god of the Phoenicians. And the Phoenician Empire, Atlantis, if you will, was based on controlling the Pillars of Melkart, or the Pillars of Hercules. And what that was the Straits of Gibraltar. By doing that, they kept all the other Europeans, all the venturesome Greeks and Romans and Egyptians and everyone else bottled up in the Mediterranean Sea and unable to see what was beyond it in the great Atlantic Ocean and across the Atlantic Ocean. They eliminated their competition. They controlled all the natural resources that lay in the rest of the whole wide world. And no one, until recently, has speculated on how far they might have gotten. And, of course, how far they got was, it appears Brazil, it appears
the Americas,
the inland rivers of North America, the Mississippi River, the Ohio River, the Colorado River. There are even some striking similarities between the language of the Maoris, the native people of New Zealand, and Phoenician writing.
So we're dealing with something that seems to have a far-reaching, and as we talked about at the beginning of the program, a far-flung empire.
Exactly.
Now, the Phoenicians, their economic base, you mentioned earlier that it was a system that dealt with leather for money. And
well, they had two currencies, quite a bit like South Africa did today. As a matter of fact, there's even a law before the United States Congress to have an internal U.S. dollar.
Don't we already have that?
Well, no, we have one currency for the United States, and you can trade it in Europe and buy things in Europe or Asia with it. But there is a proposed law to have an external dollar and an internal dollar for reasons that are, probably certainly beyond the scope of discussion of the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians themselves weren't allowed to use money or coin money. And it's really interesting because coin money was invented in the Eastern Mediterranean in the 600s B.C., and everybody picked up on the idea immediately. What a swell idea. You could, get a couple of silver sesterces and put them in your toga and just, go anywhere. There's a lot of freedom involved in having wealth that you could carry around with you. But Phoenicians and Carthaginians weren't allowed to do that. They coined all sorts of silver coins to hire mercenaries and rowers for their ships and everything else, but they coined these coins outside their cities, and the people in the cities had to use this leather kind of currency. It was a scrip, quite a bit like our paper money today. They had something probably quite a bit like the central banking system that we have.
Now, you mentioned that the Punic Wars occurred. Rome was basically repulsed by this culture. Yet, we talked about a minute ago that it seemed like some of the evidence still existed into the 500-600 years after Christ, that they still were there.
Or something was going on, certainly. Yeah.
What kind of in other words, if they've had as much of a traveling circus, if you will, whatever you want to call it, if they've had this far-flung reach around the world, certainly they were impressive to these other cultures that they mixed up with.
Oh, yes.
How much of an influence did they have on these cultures, and do we see this influence continuing on?
Oh, yeah. The great Mexican, most people call him a god. He wasn't really a god. He was more like a lawgiver or a human demigod. Quetzalcoatl. It was a white guy with a beard who arrived in a ship from far away to the east from the sunrise, and he gave the Mexicans their temple pyramids, all sorts of advanced culture, not really metallurgy, although he got them interested in finding gold and silver. And there was a lot of received knowledge that came. And, in the Aztec cultures, it's, to my mind, it's pretty obvious where it came from. There's a very close correspondence to the Phoenicians. Also, in the Incas bound their heads. The Phoenicians did that too. There have been things found in tombs, little images of guys with beards and earrings and kind of European dress. They were obviously Caucasian people. Found in Mayan tombs and Inca tombs. So, pardon me. So they had probably a pretty profound influence where they arrived with lesser cultures. And the thing is, the Phoenicians liked to deal with less sophisticated cultures because they could take advantage of them in trade. The Greek historian Herodotus wrote a lot about their methods, which he observed because he traveled among them and actually sailed on Phoenician ships.
Okay. Hold that thought. We're going to go to break. And when we come back, I want to get into the idea about what's happened with the evidence of this. What do we know about this today? Where can we go find out about this? And some of the oddities surrounding some of that. The plot thickens. So stay tuned. 860-1280, 860-1280. It's, 11:21. We'll be back after this. I'm Michael Corbin. This is the ParaNet Continuum.
Hey Denver, join me, The Critics, Saturday nights from 10 to midnight, and you'll get to complain and moan just like me. That's The Critics, Saturday nights from 10 to midnight, only on the new 1280 Route.
Freedom. It's a word that's used a lot, but what's it really mean? Doesn't it come down to the ability to choose? And if freedom lies in choice, then the legendary Jeep Grand Cherokee is the ultimate expression of freedom. Grand Cherokee's available V8 and full-time four-wheel drive, plus its refined interior, give you the choice to go anywhere with off-road capability and on-road comfort. And now there's even more freedom with a choice of low 4.8 APR financing or an extremely attractive lease. Jeep Grand Cherokee. More choices, more freedom. Check one out at your local Jeep and Eagle dealer. Jeep, there's only one, and it's a registered trademark of Chrysler Corporation.
Excuse, sir, hello, hi?
Yeah.
Listen, I'm looking for my car, and I parked it right over there.
Is that a blue sedan?
Yeah.
I got some very good news for you.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah, our crane operator was sick and we couldn't get in touch with our regular replacement.
Yeah. I don't really see what that has to do
Well,
with...
the guy we hired, as it turns out, has very bad aim.
And?
You see that wall over there?
Yeah.
Well, instead of hitting that wall, Vinny, luckily for you, hit your car!
What?
That's right, lady. You're very fortunate.
Fortunate as in how?
Well, Lady Luck is smiling on you.
Tell me.
Just when you need a new car, there's still time left in the Honda year-end clearance. But you'd better hurry, or your luck may run out.
Hey, count your blessings, lady.
The Honda 97 clearance. Timing is everything, isn't it?
Sometimes the desire to win outbalances the ability to reason, and people get hurt. Rewind to the infamous California eggplant scandal, circa 1976. The setting, San Fernando Valley. Monster eggplant contest. The players, grown men and women, eggplant farmers. The crime, one competitor knowingly injects his eggplant with an illegal performance-enhancing drug. The result, a gigantic eggplant and a disqualification. You see, winning is great, but not when vegetable mutation is involved. Which is why the Colorado Lottery has a new game. It's called Cash 5, and it's about people that like to win without giving their eggplant steroids. Cash 5, so many winners, it's just a matter of time. Prizes equal 55% of sales. Odds of winning 1 in 6.2.
The Public Station.
1280 Ralph.
And now, another career success story from Core Staff Services.
Okay, last week I finished college. Wow, now what? Well, I could continue my career at Luigi's Pizza Palace, but with all my new skills, I knew it was time to go out and get the big job. So I'm typing my resume, agonizing over my career objective, when a key on my keyboard practically jumps out at me, the help key. Well, I took this as a sign and called Core Staff, who quickly reminded me of another key, Enter, because they help people successfully enter the working world. See, they get you in the door at dozens of great companies, which can lead to the big job. Core Staff reminds me of the shift key, too, because now I've made the shift from pizza to the real world. Of course, Luigi's already bragging that he gave me my big start.
Core Staff, your keys to success.
The next Core Staff career success story might be yours. Call us toll-free at 1-888-441-WORK.
There are all kinds of givens in life. Like with any bad movie, there's always some critic who'll call it the feel-good hit of the summer. And then there are those givens you'll appreciate, like free local calls and no long-distance access charges at Hampton Inn, where you'll be satisfied or your night stay is free. It's just another one of those things you can count on. Like the guy ahead of you at the ATM machine who's doing all his banking for the next 3 years. Call 1-800-HAMPTON or access hamptonin.com on the internet for reservations. Hampton Inn. Get what you expect. Guaranteed.
Imus in the morning.
Hey, sir, come over here. Imus out there. That's what he's telling people to come into place, you know?
Morning from 4 to 10.
Run it back in the place and smoke more dope, you little jerk homo.
Right here on 1280 Ralph.
Support the ParaNet Continuum by ordering from the 1997 ParaNet catalog. ParaNet offers products and services designed to keep you abreast of the latest in ufology and news of the paranormal. Get full-color laser-printed T-shirts and sweatshirts with space travel and alien themes, including their spectacular black and white ParaNet T-shirt. Get audio cassettes of more than 150 ParaNet Continuum radio shows, featuring interviews of people such as Richard Hoagland, Jacques Vallée, Travis Walton, Stanton Friedman, Malachi Martin, Alan Hale, Betty Hill, Edgar Mitchell, and others, and topics ranging from abductions to Zeta Reticuli. You can also get Continuum, ParaNet's official quarterly magazine. ParaNet memberships have access to MyCap, our investigations group, and discounts to merchandise. The 1997 ParaNet catalog is free. Call now, 1-800-836-6381. That's 1-800-836-6381 for the ParaNet catalog.
This is the ParaNet Continuum, a weekly program dedicated to the mysterious and fascinating world of UFOs and the paranormal. If you're interested in learning more about ParaNet, the world's foremost communications network on the paranormal, call us at 303-863-0484 or write to Box 172, Wheat Ridge, Colorado, 80034. Once again, here's your host, Michael Corbin.
860-1280, 860-1280. It is 69 degrees in the city. We're a little bit past the halfway mark for the Labor Day weekend. I hope you're having a safe one and a good one. And joining again in the studio with us is Clark Matthews. We're talking about the lost civilization of Atlantis.
Whatever that was.
Whatever that was, or
probably
is.
Phoenician. Yeah.
It's Phoenician to me. You know, this is a very interesting topic, only because, I don't want to say only because, but only because it is. It has to do with the idea that we were dealing with a culture, a civilization that seemed to be highly organized. Now, you know, Graham Hancock in Fingerprints of the Gods talks about, at great length, about all these mysterious things like the Piri-Reis map. And, you know, the Piri-Reis map dates back to, 1513. And, of course, on the Piri-Reis map, there were notations that Admiral Piri-Reis himself made that says he drew from maps earlier in the millennium before Christ.
Right. And that makes a lot of sense. There were great libraries in antiquity.
Mm-hmm.
Many of them. You know, there was one at Alexandria. There were two at Alexandria. There was one at Pergamum.
Mm-hmm.
Athens had a good one. And there were all sorts of places that people would keep maps, especially, you know, detailed maps from Phoenician voyages of exploration that could conceivably show the coast of Antarctica. I mean, the most mysterious thing about the Piri-Reis map is that it's a 16th century map that shows part of Antarctica, including parts that are now under an ice sheet.
Which, in a lot of ways, all these cultures have a flood account. Most of them do, I think. And in a lot of ways, the interesting thing about, Hancock's theory is that some great cataclysm came along and wiped out this whole entire thing, and there might have been even continental displacement and et cetera, and that Atlantis might be actually buried underneath the Antarctic ice sheet. But the really interesting thing to me is that, you have this evidence. Other archaeologists have found evidence that these Phoenicians were widely traveled, and they were highly organized, highly advanced, and they were impressing these cultures with some of their oddities.
Some of their unique cultural attributes, religious and otherwise. They were certainly very advanced people. I guess in looking at the books that are written about Atlantis, especially the ones centered around Egypt, from Edgar Cayce on to John Anthony West and Graham Hancock and the others, they're centered on a kind of hidden occult body of knowledge or whatever that is secreted in the pyramids or contained in their geometry and corresponds to star positions and involves a very advanced astronomical calculation and so on and so forth, which they explain with aliens coming down in spaceships or some other way, and sort of the people on the ground receiving this knowledge from some kind of non-human intelligence. Now that's an interesting explanation, but the more elegant one, the simplest one, is that human beings with big ships and perhaps more navigational smarts than we give them credit for, certainly a very advanced knowledge of the stars and navigation, did the same thing by more conventional means, just like the Europeans and we now know the Chinese did in the 2,000 years since Christ. Not much changed between 2000 BC and 1500 AD in terms of the ships that people had.
Were these people ever wiped out?
I don't think so.
Now, if they weren't wiped out, what does that mean? I mean, what's the bottom line here?
Well, excuse me. It means that they or their successors are probably among us. There's no mystery. I mean, they never went away. They're still in Lebanon. Many of them converted to Christianity from their rather strange pagan pantheon that they worshipped in classical times. There's a lot of evidence that quite a few of them sailed away after the final defeat of Carthage with big ships, a large fleet, and a great deal of money. And where they went has been the object of great speculation. There's evidence, for instance, some of the facts around this are fascinating. There are Phoenician inscriptions on Monhegan Island off the coast of Maine. It's a big flat island, and it says loading platform for Phoenicians, or Phoenix.
Really?
Yeah. And there were bronze trade goods, knife blades, axe blades, things like that, found by guys with metal detectors along the beach of the Bay of Fundy there by Monhegan Island. Your listeners in the northeastern part of the United States can go up to New Hampshire and visit Mystery Hill, which is a whole solar temple. It's a Baal temple built in a series of buildings in a hillside, and it's positioned with the spring and winter, or excuse me, the spring and summer. No, it's the summer and winter solstice. The sun will shine directly into doors of this. There's also some Phoenician inscriptions there. There's a sacrificial table. I mean, it's a pagan, Stonehenge-like thing in New Hampshire. There have been Carthaginian coins found in Columbus, Georgia, on old Indian trading trails. The evidence abounds. It's really in plain sight that they were here. Whether they came here in their thousands with ships loaded with silver and gold and buried it maybe in Sable Island, Nova Scotia, where there's some evidence that there's a very large treasure buried deep in the ground there, or whether they went up the Rhine River and settled in northern Europe, or whether they went to all of those places or someplace else. Who knows?
Yeah. Now, when you're talking about the things that you can see, the temples and these different things, What about the archaeological angle to this? I noticed that you've mentioned earlier that several prominent archaeologists who have worked on this stuff, some of this stuff turns up missing.
Yes, with alarming frequency.
When you say, to clarify, when you say missing, this stuff is brought somewhere to be cataloged, I assume, and put on display, and it disappears.
Yes, or the people who find it just won't reveal it after a while.
Mm.
The coins that were found and photographed in Columbus, Georgia, went missing not long after that. The blades that were found, these were like knife blades, axe blades. They were trade goods. They're something that you'd sell to the Indians. They'd put a handle on it, then they'd have an axe or a knife or whatever. The people who discovered those won't sell them. So there have been some other things that are a little bit more disturbing. People have reported things to the Smithsonian Institution, and the Smithsonian has written them back saying that that's an interesting theory, but we don't credit it much. And then when people go and revisit the 12-foot high stone that they found covered with lettering, they find it's missing.
Missing.
Yes.
And not necessarily the beam me up Scotty kind of missing, but
just with crowbar marks and things.
Yeah. Purposeful loading it in the back of a truck and hauling it somewhere.
Well, yeah. How much of these things end up in private collections or whatever, that's difficult to say, but there's no shortage of it. Even with all the pillage and looting and disappearances, there's lots around.
Okay, we're going to go to another break. When we come back, I want to find out what your theory is on why this stuff seems to get, why it goes missing, or it almost implies possibly a cover-up. So when we come back, we'll address that maybe and talk about that. 860-11280, 860-1280. My guest in studio is Clark Matthews. We are talking about the lost civilization of Atlantis. Is it lost, bound, or, as we were saying, always been here? We'll be back after this. I'm Michael Corbin, and this is the ParaNet Continuum.
Real sports talk with Jim Rome in the jungle.
You had a take sign 2-0, and Chucky ran his now infamous Chucky's hacking 2-0. Chucky don't see no take sign 2-0.
10-2, 1280, Ralph.
Get ready to copy down some computer addresses. I'm going to tell you how you can plug into the oldest and most reliable news and information service on UFOs and the paranormal on the entire planet. It's the ParaNet Information Services Worldwide Network. First of all, check out our page on the World Wide Web. It provides you hot links to other UFO and paranormal sites, along with audio clips from recent ParaNet radio shows and much more. Type in www.paranet.org/paranet/. If you're a subscriber to America Online, CompuServe, or the Microsoft Network, you can access the 7 ParaNet news groups covering UFOs, metaphysics, parapsychology, and more. Just select the Internet Newsgroup function from your online service and search for ParaNet. You can also send us email at this address, paranet@paranet.org. So, don't accept wannabes and substitutes. The name is ParaNet, the world's most important communications network.
Dude, my car looks like I parked on a golf course. That hailstorm really dented my car.
Man, I know how you feel. My car looked that way after the last hailstorm, too. That's why I took my ride to Auto Magic of Colorado. Auto Magic of Colorado saved me time and money, and they did an excellent job in fixing my car without affecting the factory finish.
I still can't believe how bad my car looks, but I do feel better knowing that Auto Magic of Colorado can do a great job and save me money on a paintless dent repair.
Let me give you the number, 403-8210.
Great, thanks. Auto Magic of Colorado, 403-8210.
Ever spend half a day hailing a cab in the rain in a certain unnamed big city with that Statue of Liberty, and when you finally catch one, you ask in your most professional, non-touristy way, how much will this ride cost? And the guy scowls in his rearview mirror as he says, upfront pricing? What do you think this is, that new GM Good Wrench Service Plus? And you think, hey, generous tip. So you go and get upfront pricing, plus a lifetime guarantee on parts and labor, plus courtesy transportation. And you think, GM Good Wrench Service Plus. The plus means better.
Call 800-96-GM Plus for the select GM dealer near you. Ask for limited lifetime guarantee details.
The Public's radio station, 1280 Ralph.
It's summer fair now at Applebee's with salads as cool as a cool summer breeze. Mouth-watering roll-ups served just as you please. Summer fair at Applebee's.
Yes, right now, America's favorite neighbor is cooking up 8 new Applebee's summer fair dishes. Like buffalo chicken salad with hot, tangy Tabasco breaded chicken and cool, fresh veggies. 3 kinds of new salad roll-ups, too. Try the Caesar, Santa Fe, or Oriental chicken. And Applebee's Grill is sizzling with low-fat Navajo chicken. Marinated chicken breasts smothered in a low-fat black bean sauce. Why, there's even our new crunchy Mediterranean grill bread. So come in, because Applebee's Summer Fair won't last forever.
You belong at Applebee's.
Right now at Applebee's is serving 8 new summer dishes. So come in today to one of our 21 Colorado locations because like summer, Applebee's Summer Fair won't last forever.
There are many magazines about UFOs. Continuum is different. Continuum is the official quarterly publication of ParaNet and MyCap and is the outgrowth of ParaNet's worldwide communications network on paranormal phenomena. It's in-depth, challenging, and above all, fascinating. It takes a straight-ahead, no-nonsense look at UFOs, worldwide sighting reports, parapsychology, abduction phenomena, futuristic science, and much, much more. You can get Continuum for just $18 a year. Continuum is also available by fax for a small additional fee. Be informed. Call now and subscribe to Continuum. Call 1-800-UFO-NET-1. That's 1-800-836-6381. Visa and MasterCard accepted. Continuum, published by ParaNet Information Services in MyCap. Order yours today at 1-800-UFO-NET-1. Continuum, one of the most fascinating magazines you'll ever read.
Tastes great and less filling. 1280 Ralph.
As you can tell, the ships from Phoenicia are arriving as we speak.
The Georgetown crew team.
Yeah. 860-1280, 860-1280. You're back with Michael Corbin and my guest in studio, Clark Matthews. Clark, now, what is going on with this evidence? What is happening with it?
Well, a lot of it's too big to move. You know, there are cliff faces and rock shelters and caves. There's an abundance of inscriptions, epigraphs, they're called. Not just in Phoenician, but in other languages writing Phoenician words. The other languages would have been from the rowers of the ships, you know, Spanish people that were hired on as ship's crews and actually rowed the ships over here and might have been left here to, you know, to service them in ports of call. There is a disconcerting tendency for things to disappear, though. Coins, the Parahybo stone, the first, you know, really good Phoenician inscription that was found in Brazil, did disappear about a decade after it was found, I believe. It was around that time frame. And shortly before, evidence was uncovered in Lebanon showing that the thing was almost certainly genuine. Where's it going? Good question. One would think collectors, perhaps the Phoenicians themselves or their successors.
They don't want to be discovered.
Maybe.
I'm amazed at how much our culture today has so many of the similarities. I mean, which you mentioned earlier, you know.
Well, that's the really striking thing.
It seems like there was a New World Order before there was a New World Order.
Well, there was, yeah.
Order.
A New World Order is the Old World Order, or the pre-Christian World Order. Some of the similarities are striking. Certainly the fact that people were deliberately running a cashless society with money that represented nothing, but that was value. Back when everyone else was banging out coins and they just loved the idea of having some pocket change to carry around and all the freedom that it gave them, the Phoenicians were basically using symbolic money as we do today. And it wasn't paper, it was leather.
Was it a Federal Reserve note?
Well, no one knows. Whether they had something like a central bank, it probably would have been a temple of some kind. It might have been the temple of their principal god, Melkart, because the temples worked as banks in those days.
I didn't know that.
Yes, they all did. They were more like savings banks, but they could well have been lending banks. I mean, if they had a symbolic money, a paper or leather money, that would have been monetized based on deposits in a temple or a bank or something like that, and they would have quickly learned if they were doing that they could set up a fractional reserve system and actually issue 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 times as much leather as they actually had silver back in the temple, because people wouldn't be able, or most people would rather use the convenient leather money rather than the clanky silver money, so there would be no chance of it being called. In any event, it looks like the Phoenicians weren't allowed to have coins, because the eerie thing about their cities, like Tyre and Carthage and others, is that there are no coins. The coins that you find are Greek coins or Turkish coins or Persian coins, Egyptian coins, and they're in tombs that they're left with, people as sort of as part of the other offerings or items that would be left in a tomb. There was no Carthaginian coined money in Carthage.
How do you figure they got around that?
Now, that's a good question. It raises more questions than it answers. They would have had some kind of social control system or the kind of society where people had to rely on the state. It was probably what we'd now call something like a socialist or socialist oligarchy, or maybe even a socialist theocracy, where people were sort of bound to these gods, foremost among them Melkart, who made all sorts of unreasonable demands on these poor people. And they really had no recourse because they didn't have any property, they didn't have any rights except...
They just worked for the state.
Yeah, except for the rights that they got by obliging the ruling classes and the gods themselves, who were pretty unpleasant characters, a lot of them.
Now, when you say the temples, that's interesting, too, because didn't that period of time they have temple prostitutes and that kind of thing?
The Phoenicians did, yes.
And what was the story behind that? I mean, that kind of figured into some aspects of maybe how a family would maybe appease or, deal with the state.
Well, whether it was the state or the religious establishment, or whether the state and the religious establishment were one and the same.
A theocracy, like you were talking about.
Yeah. We don't know. The people who wrote about it at the time, there was a Greek historian named Polybius who wrote in a lot of detail about Carthage. He even wrote its constitution. It had a pretty good constitution, he said. But people would, the state would be making demands on people, but they would be religious demands. And those demands could even include sacrificing your firstborn child to one of these.
Which there's evidence that was done.
There's
a considerable
ample evidence.
Sure.
That was done. In this country, too.
Really?
Yes. In upstate New York, they found what are called urn burials, and these are kind of characteristic little pots, and usually it was a child that would be sacrificed to Baal, and they'd pour the ashes in a little amulet into this urn, and it was a very characteristic kind of urn, and they'd bury the urn near the temple precinct. And there's a striking similarity between the stuff that was dug up in, I believe it was Oswego, New York, urn burials, and these urn burials that they had in Carthage and in western Spain when the Phoenicians were running Spain. So it was a nasty kind of establishment that they had there. They were good bankers, though, and very good navigators, very advanced people, but very complex people, too, with all the implications. And that's the ultimate question. Certainly it's a charming idea to think that euphonauts came down to Egypt and inspired people to build pyramids in the pattern of a constellation and left these things as a repository of knowledge. But the more reality-based approach to me, and I know your charter is to do a UFO-based...
we cover all aspects of this kind of stuff.
This is the flip side of the coin, and I think this is perhaps the more reality-based thing. And as a spiritual vector, the Phoenicians were not especially nice people, as you point out.
Well, and again, I think it's important to entertain both sides of the issue. We've had, Graham Hancock and all these other guys on. And, it's nice to talk about the flip side of it, where the evidence is. And I know that you've shown me this evidence that is contained in this work that these other archaeologists and people like that have done. To me, it's like amazing.
It's case closed.
Case closed, yeah. I mean, there's a very little doubt that these people, these Phoenicians, did have an impact on many of the cultures around the world, and that they were there in the same kind of time period that some of these other writers and archaeologists or whoever they are try to say, well, this is all attributable to, UFOnauts or Space Brothers or something like that. Nevertheless, I think it's interesting to note that even in the Egyptian culture, there was human sacrifice.
Very briefly, there was.
Yes.
In between two of the major dynasties, but it stopped almost as soon as it started. It was a very brief interval that there's any archaeological record of that they've found yet, or that's been published.
But I'm also myself, just in talking to you, in the time that we've been talking about this over the last day or two, I'm kind of surprised that when you talk about what people are being told or what people know that's going on out there, I was totally amazed at this evidence that you have.
Well, it's the evidence largely of people who devoted their whole lives to finding it. These days, people are pulling these threads together. The work of the seminal writers, researchers, diggers, and linguists in this field, and trying to get a more coherent picture. And of course, as more people know what to look for, people certainly here in the West, and even in New England and Pennsylvania, the next time they knock down an old dry stone wall and find that some of the stones have carvings on them, they might not dismiss them as Indian or colonial carvings, but might take a closer look and find out that they're much, much older. So the body of knowledge builds. The more people are aware that these things might not be old petroglyphs, might not be old, or more recent artifacts.
Okay.
All it needs is people looking at it, looking for it.
Lots of people looking at it.
Yeah.
Should be. 860-1280, 860-1280. Guest is Clark Matthews in studio. We're talking about the lost civilization of Atlantis. We'll be right back after this.
Hi, Ron Egloff here. 1977 was a big year here in Denver. I started my NFL football career with the Denver Broncos, who went to our first Super Bowl that year, and the Jackson's All-American Sports Grills, then known as Jackson's Whole Saloons, got their start as well. I'm retired from football now, but I'm a member of the Jackson's All-American Sports Grill team, and we are still going strong. We've grown to 6 locations now: Southeast Denver, Lakewood, Thornton, Lodo, in the Denver Tech Center, and Greeley. Our size may have changed, but a number of things haven't. Jackson serves the same great hamburger and cheeseburger that make them the only ones in the Restaurant Association Hall of Fame. But we serve more than just burgers. Our pizzas, salads, buffalo wings, and other casual fare make Jackson's not only the best place for sports viewing in the area, but the best casual dining experience for singles and families alike. For 20 years now, Jackson's All-American Sports Grills have been an area tradition. So whether it's great food, catering, our daily happy hours, great sports viewing, or just getting together with family or friends, make Jackson's All-American Sports Grills the place for you.
If you go to the bookstore at Georgetown and you see Allen Iverson's gear there,
Jim Rome, 10 to 2.
Nobody's buying it because it's Georgetown gear. They're buying Allen Iverson's number. Give them their stipend. And how else is Allen Iverson going to get a gun or blunts?
Right here in Denver, 1280 Ralph.
When I say left, you say right, right. When I say cat, you say mouse, right. When I say Radio Shack, you say America's #1 IBM Activa computer retailer. You didn't say that, right? Probably surprised. Don't be. If you ever bought even the smallest thing at Radio Shack, you know how nice and helpful they are. Guess what? They're the same way when you buy the big stuff. Radio Shack. You've got questions? Right. We've got answers.
Jane, didn't Sears just deliver a new fridge to you yesterday?
Uh-huh.
So what's in this box?
Our new upright freezer.
Now's the time to save on all those appliances and electronics you've been wanting, because Sears has them all on sale. All the top names like Kenmore, Whirlpool, GE, RCA, Sony, Panasonic, Packard Bell, and Compaq. Plus, they'll give you free delivery on appliances over $299. But hurry, Sears sale on appliances and electronics ends Wednesday, September 3rd. Free U.S. delivery only with mail-in certificate. Outlet stores and Bose excluded. See store for details.
Why the hell would you want to get out of bed early on a Saturday morning? Why to tune in the Colorado Outdoor Show with Uncle Milty and Ray King Carp Colby, Saturday morning, 6 to 7 a.m. on 1280 Routes.
860-1280, 860-1280. My guest is Clark Matthews. I like that intro music. It kind of picks up the pace a bit. You know, let's recap in the few moments we've got before the end of the program. We are talking about the Atlanteans are not such a mysterious civilization after all, and that perhaps they are still with us. And you mentioned earlier that they could still be with us.
They could still be with us. Their ideas in economics, in mathematics, even some of their religious beliefs could be shaping our world today and what our world might be tomorrow. You know, you have a cashless society subject to all kinds of social controls with a new world religion, as some people are talking about, whatever that means and whatever that opens the door to. Who knows what it could be? I guess the point is that extraordinary claims demand extraordinary proof, and if you're going to claim that the advanced human civilization was all received from superior beings from space or some other non-human intelligence, you ought to at least demand extraordinary proof of that and see if there isn't evidence for something else. And the extraordinary evidence, it seems to me, is that Atlantis was right out there in plain sight, most of it well above water, high and dry, and very much part of the hidden legacy of the past that continues eerily so up to this present day.
Interesting.
Institutions and other things.
Now, I know one other thing I want to do to wrap up this program is give out some information, you know, because I think it's important people look this stuff up and check it out for themselves, because as I've mentioned, you have shown me numerous articles, numerous books and things that have been written on this subject, and I'm impressed by the amount of evidence that shows a Phoenician connection or a Phoenician influence on some of these cultures. And they're not just over there, they're over here as well.
They sure are.
You mentioned Barry Fell. Now, what was that book, the name of that book, the title of that book?
Dr. Barry Fell was an eminent linguist and archaeologist, an epigrapher. He was a specialist in inscriptions carved in stone, monuments, and so forth. He wrote a book. He wrote many books, but foremost among them is a book called America BC, America Before Columbus. It's still in print from Pocket Books. Definitely worth a read. Dr. Fell has passed away, but he was one of the leading researchers in this. Another early and very persuasive researcher was a lady named Constance Irwin, who wrote a book, Fair Gods and Stone Faces, in which she basically concentrated exclusively on the Central American and Mexican cultures as a diffusion of Mediterranean culture. That book is out of print for a long time, very hard to come by, but well worth the effort.
That one had the most scary pictures of Bale Melkart.
Yes, Bale Melkart is an elusive character. There are some images of him, and he ain't pretty.
Is he related to Bale Go-Kart?
Bale Go-Kart. And
I told you, they just raced through the studios. It's the Phoenicians.
So your listeners might well be interested. Barry Fell's book is certainly the most easily obtainable. Constance Irwin's is one of the most revealing. And anyone who wants to write me on the subject can write me in the over the internet at ClarkM, ClarkM, at cnct.com.
Okay, that's ClarkM at cnct.com. Clark, I want to thank you for being on the program. I also want to thank you, for the years of association that I've had with you. It's been a very interesting association. You do fine work, and
thank you.
You really do, and
the pleasure has been entirely mine.
Well, thank you very much. Really enjoy it. Okay, that wraps it up for us tonight, and let me give out some of my vitals. If you want to reach me, you can do so at 863-0484. Again, that number is 863-0484. My email address is mcorbin@dimensional.com. mcorbin@dimensional.com. One other thing I want to mention is, and I didn't get to talk about this tonight, don't miss the upcoming edition of the ParaNet Continuum magazine. Can't even say it. 800-836-6381 is how you get information about that. Until next week, I'm Michael Corbin telling you to keep your eyes on the skies. Good night.
Brace yourself. The following sound will strike fear into the hearts of ice cream lovers everywhere.
It's the sound of a spoon hitting the cold, hard bottom of a quart container of Baskin-Robbins ice cream. It means it's over. You've hit bottom.
But perk up, fellow spoon jockeys, because Baskin-Robbins proudly presents a spectacular 2 for $5.49 offer, where you get any 2 pre-pack quarts of ice cream or hard scoop yogurt for just $5.49. And we get to wonder if we're not a little loopy for coming up with such a ridiculous low price. 2 cold, delicious pre-pack quarts of your favorite Baskin-Robbins flavors, like Grainings and Cream, mint chocolate chip, or Jamocha almond fudge for just $5.49. What are you waiting for? 2 quarts for $5.49? This is one ice screaming low price.
And just think, you may never have to hear a